Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Zoom In on the Halal Metropolis, where we're checking in on the Muslim communities of Metro Detroit and seeing how people are adjusting and how they're acclimating to the new reality under the coronavirus. And today with me, we have a very special guest, Dr. Saba Maroof. She is a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist. Welcome, Saba. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum, Razi. Thank you so much for inviting me. Actually, this is kind of funny because I think the last time we talked, I was interviewing you.
Yeah, that's true. That is the last time we spoke. So the tables have turned a bit. So,
Yeah.
you're a mental health expert and a mental health professional. Can you tell us what that means, and can you describe your work a little bit?
Sure. And thank you so much for taking the time to do this, to highlight, the different people in our community and how we're kind of all adjusting and some contributing, as kind of all in our own ways, contributing to our communities and society. But yes, as you mentioned, I'm a psychiatrist. I'm a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist. So I see patients of all ages, really. And that means, and I always like to explain it because I know that there's a lot of confusion between a psychiatrist and a psychologist. That means I went the med school route. So I went through medical school and then training in psychiatry. And then I did an extra year, really, or 2 years of child psychiatry as a fellowship, child and adolescent psychiatry. So, yeah. And it's really interesting because, as this was all happening, just such a sudden shift for all of us. From our kids being home from school, for those, out there that are listening that are parents, to just being so worried about, of course, our health and the health of our loved ones, the health of our older, family members and friends. And I guess in some ways I'm kind of fortunate in that I was able to pretty seamlessly, there were some, growing pains with it, but some transition, but I was able to pretty seamlessly transition into telehealth or telepsychiatry. And I work with a lot of different therapists and am in contact with a lot of psychiatrists locally, as well as, actually really across the nation, thanks to social media. And pretty much, many people were already there's some psychiatrists that are actually already practicing only just 100% tele practice. There's a few psychiatrists I spoke to that I've heard from that actually practice across state lines, like they're licensed in like 6 different states. So that's kind of like their norm. But it was still pretty sudden. It was literally kind of overnight, and we just had to figure out what's the best platform. But in a sense, it's been really nice to be able to continue with that work. And I really, especially the last few weeks, I've really been thinking about it, that being able to see my patients and connect with them every day has really been a blessing too. For many of my patients, I've been seeing them for a long time, some, a few years or several years. And, we've kind of gotten into this rhythm. We check in, we see how they're doing. But they, I know a lot about, of course, their personal lives, and some of them know about me. And it's almost like a really nice exchange, like a really nice, a nice way to kind of have some normalcy and a sense of connection. So it's been a blessing.
So you've now adjusted to being completely remote, and you're seeing patients through Zoom meetings or Zoom and other apps like that now.
Yes, exactly.
And how's that been?
It's interesting. Like I said, first of all, it was overnight. It was basically a crash course into transitioning into telehealth. I was watching like webinars the weekend before because I'm like, okay, this is probably going to happen. And by Tuesday, I was really my first day was March 17th. And I work at a few different places. At least right now, I work at a few different clinics. And so every place has kind of their own record keeping, their way of, like, their own electronic medical record, their own way that they want me to do things. So that was kind of interesting, but it's been nice. And I work with therapists at all the places that I work pretty closely with the different therapists, and they've all adjusted too. But, I think the other thing that is an interesting part of this is that we're kind of like in this autopilot mode and go, move on to the next, we just kind of keep going. And many of us, I think, realized that it was pretty exhausting for many reasons. And a lot of the mental health professionals that I've been in touch with are describing that they're just feeling really tired, even though we're not leaving our homes. But it's really exhausting. Even just, I'm sure you've noticed there's this way of communicating. We're so lucky to have technology and being able to FaceTime and use, all these different apps to be able to connect virtually. But, you lose a lot too, in that interaction, body language, and even just the act of like hyper focusing on the screen for such long periods of time is
Yeah.
very exhausting.
Yeah, we're
And also
definitely
with
feeling
that,
that because
yeah,
we're doing so many of these interviews, and so much of our work has shifted completely online and virtual. So I feel like I'm on the computer way more than
yeah.
than before.
I
Yeah.
mean, physically on our eyes, but then
Mhm.
just socio emotionally too. And I really felt that actually a few weeks even before Ramadan, it was kind of catching up to me. And I also kind of realized, talking with others in our field, that we were so focused on, like I said, making this transition, being available to our patients, and many of us, like you mentioned, that you've been even more busy during this period. I think many of us we're kind of like, oh, well, we're at home, so I can just add people, like make my day a little bit longer. Usually I was done at 4 o'clock. I don't have to pick up the kids. So I'll just work till 5 or 6 or something, or I'll
Mm.
work on the day that was usually scheduled off, and not really realizing that again, that was going to contribute to the mental fatigue and exhaustion as well as when you kind of are in that autopilot and go, go, go mode, you are, it's kind of like for some of us, it, you're kind of not really taking the time to assess kind of your own emotions, in a
Mhm.
way, and kind of like how, you're dealing with it. I remember, I was kind of holding out hope that we might, have the kids return to school. My oldest is in 8th grade, and so it's his
Yeah.
last, he's not a senior. My heart really goes out to the 12th graders and seniors in college, but still, it's kind of a milestone transitional year, especially with him being in Islamic school. It's like leaving that comfort and that small cohort of students that he's been with so many years.
Mhm.
So I was like kind of emotional when we were like, okay, that's it. We're actually not going back, and we're going to be missing all of these milestones and celebrations that we were looking forward
Mm.
to. And I was like, okay, well, actually, I have a patient in like 5 minutes, so I had to kind of wrap it up in a little box and like, okay, compartmentalize it, and like, okay, we'll
Yeah.
deal with that later. And having to be on and prepared to help someone else with their own sense of loss or
Yeah.
anxiety or whatever emotions they're dealing with.
So it's National Mental Health Month, and so in the midst of the situation that we find ourselves in, what does that mean, particularly this year? And I guess to get it even more narrower, you have children of your own, and you primarily provide care to kids, and so what does this mean for kids in particular, and what are things that kids should be aware of right now, and for parents too to know about.
So yeah, it is interesting. So many of these special months are overlapping, Ramadan and
Yeah,
Mental Health Awareness
yeah.
Month. It is very interesting because this year it really does mean a lot more, in the sense that we're kind of all talking about mental health. If we're not going to be talking about it, if we're not talking about it now, we're going to be talking about it. We all know the physical ramifications of COVID-19, and we're trying to all social distance so we can flatten that curve and keep those ERs less full and as much as we can. um, and I think when we're focusing on what we can do in the here and now to prepare, to help our families, to help our loved ones, to keep healthy, there is a mental health impact with all of this as well. And so there's a really interesting chart, actually, that someone had used to illustrate that right now we have like kind of like this peak with all the, again, physical manifestations of COVID, but then you have like the mental health impact. It's kind of starting
Mm,
to rise, and it's going to keep going.
mm,
And that's what many people, of course, in medicine and in my field are really kind of preparing and to do, is to kind of be able to provide that help. I think a lot of people are out there doing just this, like helping kind of provide education, talking about like, that it's okay if you need help to get help. Now, at the same time, and just kind of these conversations that it doesn't mean that everyone's going to be feeling stressed and anxious, and this is a normal response, and we don't have to pathologize all of those emotions. Everybody is stressed out right now.
yeah,
There's a range of emotions that we're all going through, and at the same time, it kind of changes on a day-to-day basis. Sometimes it changes on an hour-to-hour basis, as you
yeah.
different as you kind of, but in terms of kids, I think the main thing is, so I work with kids, I work with adults. Working with kids means I work with parents too. And I also have adults as patients as well. But the number one thing, as we're talking about child mental health, is focusing on the mental health of parents and self-care of parents and managing our own emotions so that we can help our kids, so that we're modeling for our kids, but also that, they're kind of seeing how we're handling situations, and also that we're emotionally available for them, to listen, and not necessarily, sometimes even as adults, what we do is we kind of tend to brush things under the rug and, as I was just mentioning, kind of compartmentalize our feelings. And again, you're just kind of getting through the day and very busy, distracting ourselves. And we don't always have time to kind of sit with our feelings or just really recognize what the emotions that we are experiencing. And that's something that's kind of really important, to be there for our kids when they're, when they need to express it. And different kids different ages, depending on the age and developmental level, kids are going to respond to stress in different ways. And so being able to recognize that as well. Yeah.
I think that's really important. I appreciate the point that you made about modeling, because it's almost it sounds like it's like a great model for like a familial mental health or collective mental health in your families and in your homes. So as we come to a close, what are some good habits that you can leave us with? I think right now, particularly as we don't know how long this is going to last. The stay-at-home orders are being extended. I think back in March and in mid-March, it felt like, okay, the initial shock, and maybe there's an anxiety that comes with the shock of that. Now we're 2 months into it. And so we're at a different phase. And so how do we sustain ourselves in a healthy way, emotionally and psychologically, to prepare ourselves for something that we may not know how long this thing is going to last?
Those are great questions, Rezi, and you're totally right. I think exactly. Initially, it was shock, or kind of everybody responds to stress in different ways. Maybe mobilization, like mobilizing, getting things ready for your family, for yourself. What are things that I can do? Again, being in active mode. And you're right, as this kind of goes on, as it's kind of prolonged, it's like, wow, okay, there's another set of emotions again. So again, what we're definitely talking about is the basics, basically recognizing that this is, especially now, recognizing that this is really a marathon and not a sprint. So we really all have to kind of take care of ourselves, not spread ourselves too thin, and take care of our physical body, in the sense making sure that we're getting enough rest and sleep, that we're eating well, that we're eating healthy, that we're hydrating, kind of those basic needs are met, and moving your body, and then the extra steps, like getting out in nature, taking a walk. I know that was something that was very helpful for me personally, was trying to get out every day. That was before we kind of had this stint of cold weather again in Michigan. But even if there's like 5 minutes of nice weather, is if you can, trying to get outside. So really self-care, and self-care means different things to different people. And I don't necessarily mean like, well, obviously we can't go for massages, or, if that was your way of self-care before, or, manicures or pedicures or something, but self-care meaning that, like, being kind to yourself, giving yourself space, giving yourself permission to not have to be productive all the time. We live in a society that really, prioritizes, that really pushes this idea of productivity, and there's a whole shelves on self-help and productivity in the bookstores, and that we're not having those same high expectations of yourself, and being okay with needing rest, and also differentiating rest from numbing yourself, either if it's like just kind of mindlessly scrolling, or we also are recognizing in the mental health field that this is kind of, unfortunately, can be kind of a prime setup for substance abuse, relapsing, for people that have really worked hard to maintain sobriety, especially people that live by themselves and they're dealing with, again, those feelings. They don't have all those distractions anymore. So really nurturing yourself too, because again, we really have to prepare ourselves for a marathon, not it's not a sprint. And also limiting the news and social media, knowing what your triggers are. If you have a hard time sleeping, or you're watching things, again, if you're scrolling and you happen to come across something and it's going to be harder to fall asleep. So recognizing that and trying to fill that time maybe with something that's a little bit more calming and soothing. And those are reminders for all ages. It's really funny. Even my 8-year-old daughter, I don't know, I think she was talking to her friends or cousins, and she's like, "This is going to last for 2 years. We're not going to have Halloween." And I was like, "Oh, okay." And I was like, "Well," and here I am as an adult, and I'm like trying to take it like 2 weeks at a time,
Yeah.
kind of like governor, like extending it every 2 weeks. I can only work on 2 weeks at a time. And really, I was trying to impart that to her because, yes, if we think about it, in the long term, I mean, yes, we need to prepare, but if it's going to impact, and it does, if it impacts your mental health that way, that, just kind of, it just feels very burdensome, then just take it like a few weeks at a time because, nobody knows.
Yeah.
So why fill yourself with, kind of like those negative thoughts. And I think we all tend to do a little bit better when we kind of take it a step at a time and a day at a time.
Wow, thank you so much. That is great advice, and I feel like it's hitting close to home right now. So, but you heard it here, folks. Limit your news intake these days. So, it's just I feel like it's so easy, just to kind of jump on it, and I think we all want to know what's going on.
Yeah.
We all want to be aware of what's going on, and there's just such a flood of information, but it's something that I really struggle with because I'm one of those people. I just want to know everything, and I'm constantly checking the numbers every day. But I think that's great advice because I feel like the days when I'm not looking at the news, I just feel so much better, just personally. So I feel like you were speaking right to me without knowing.
Well, I think, most of us are like that. We have all this information at our fingertips, so it's just such a temptation. And, and maybe picking like another advice I had read and have been giving too is maybe picking one or two reliable sources as well. So you're not kind of reading everything. Do you need to know all the protests that are happening? Maybe not. So another thing is I think finding, I know a lot of people are finding this helpful, is reframing situations and finding the silver lining in certain situations. And I think especially the Muslim community, we've really had to do that with Ramadan. But I've been reading so many beautiful posts and of people doing that. Ramadan is a very communal month, it's such a collective celebration, and we've all had to it's mind-boggling actually how different this Ramadan is. But there's so many silver linings in it too, for many of us. And practicing gratitude, journaling, or I just saw, I do, some of the people that I do follow on Instagram are a lot of different therapists and psychologists and other mental health practitioners. And one of the things I just just saw this morning, I thought was really nice, was just taking like 60 seconds, 1 minute of your day, and just focus, just saying out loud what you're thankful for and what even if it's like, I'm thankful for my hands, and then what you're thankful for, what that helps you do. And just spending 60 seconds, that's something I'm going to do with my kids. I thought that was really nice. And really practicing gratitude really does, there have been studies that have looked at this. For example, comparing just writing in your journal versus actually listing what you're grateful for. And the people that did that for even 2 weeks, they actually had higher scores on if they were doing like a survey, survey measuring kind of happiness or their emotional index score. So even in just 2 weeks of doing that can help. And then I think lastly too is connecting with positive and supportive people, being okay. I mean, social distancing, we don't have to necessarily socially isolate ourselves, but if there are people that are kind of bringing you down, maybe socially distance yourself even extra.
Take a break from them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, you want to be there for people, but you also we all have to kind of take care of ourselves too and fill our cup. And
yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time, Dr. Maroof. I really appreciate your time and all the great work that you're doing. We'll try to get this word out there, so people can follow this advice. I think it's really important right now because this, we don't know what's going to happen. So, but again, thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your Ramadan. And stay home and stay safe. Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Thank you so much, Rosie.